I didn't learn that my English name was Howard. Not until I came to kindergarten. And I remember one thing my mother really stressed on me before driving to kindergarten was learn to say bathroom. Not potential bathroom. I'm one of the critters back here. Back row, third from the right. Let's see what. Okay, here we go. First of all, I want to thank Mary and Brett for forming this reunion. Now, Mary called me about 4 months ago, and she says, "Howell, I'm thinking of starting or bringing together people from Keetley." And I thought to myself, "Oh, great! This is great!" And I told her, "Please sign me up." Now, what I pictured in my mind was 30 people. You know, we would get together in the same hotel, have dinner, we'll sit around in a circle, and reminisce about Keetley. So when I asked Mary on the phone, "How many do you expect?" She said 100. And now, this was in my mind. I thought to myself, Mary, what a word you've been spoken. But look at it now. What is it? 160? Amazing. This is amazing. Okay. You know what? Oh, I was instructed by my family to keep it nice, and short, and thick and concise. All right? Or, you know, maybe but hey, you have to understand, as long as I have the mic, I have the power. Yeah, I can steer all night. But, you know, something's wrong here. I got the wrong, you know. I don't know what they're complaining about, because my notes originally was 12 pages. But now I got it down to 4. So they have nothing to complain about. But anyway, Keetley was a very unique experience. But before I talk about Keetley, I'd like to go back to December 7th, 1941. It was a very trying experience for the parents when Japan, you know, attacked Pearl Harbor. There was a lot of fear in the community. You have to understand too, in those days, you had pockets of community. You know, you had the Japantown, right? You had Chinatown. You have, right now in LA, you have Koreatown, and Little Saigon, okay? And what they speak, their language within these communities is their native language. Once you step out, they have to deal with the English. And this is where a lot of the Japanese people have problems, okay? Now, of course, the fear was great. I know my mother was extremely fearful of what's happened, all right? I remember her burning anything in the house that had anything to do with Japan. Magazines, books, letters, and worst of all, my Japanese toys. That really upset me. But anyway, you know, it's understandable. Another thing, what happened, I don't know if many of you know about it, but at that time, many Japanese men were arrested by the FBI. They swooped down on a lot of these men who were earmarked. And every day my mother would say, oh, Mr. So-and-so got arrested. Mr. So-and-so got arrested and such. They were arrested without any warrant. And they were not given any trial. They were not given any representation. They were segregated in separate prisons around the United States. And some in actual, not prisons, but camps around the United States. And also in prisons. I just found out a few years ago that my distant cousin was incarcerated in Leavenworth. Now, Leavenworth is a federal prison. Now, can you imagine these men with families being taken away for 4 years? They weren't heard from again for 4 years until after the war. If they were married, the wives became a widow. And a lot of these wives were never heard from their husband until after the war. And I don't know now if any of us here could take that. I really don't. And you gotta hand it to these people who survived through all this. But anyway, one reason it was so important that our family got out, that's myself, my sister, my mother, father, was 3 reasons. Number one, my father was an illegal alien. Number two, my father, when he was in his early 20s, he served in the Japanese Navy. That in itself, should seal it. And then third, I later found out my real name, last name is Taniguchi, not Yamamoto. Okay. So that's kind of, okay, Taniguchi. Sounds like Howard Yamamoto. But anyway, so when my father, who was a good friend of Fred Wada, heard that he was going to Farm Group and find a place in Utah, a place called Keetley. He said immediately he signed up. All right. Now, you have to understand, in those days, we were not a mobile society. In those days, to travel 60 miles was a big deal. But to trek across California, Nevada, and Utah, it's almost unheard of. But anyway, we signed on. We packed what we could pack in our automobile with a few suitcases, all right? And we traveled across California, Nevada, and Utah. But I don't ever remember, I really don't ever remember staying in a hotel. I remember always sleeping in a car. I don't remember eating in a restaurant. My mother, I believe, would buy enough food to last us all maybe 4 or 5 meals. Part of that was she was afraid to go into the hotel and try to get a room. She was afraid that they would mock her, they would call her names and such, all right? And so anyway, this is how we traveled across the, California, Nevada, and Utah. Now, in Utah, when we got to Keetley, it was quite an experience because my mother and father were shocked by what they saw. They didn't realize Keetley, Utah was a ghost town. You had abandoned apartments, and then you had scattering of homes, all right, abandoned. And anyway, we were lucky enough to get a little shed right next to the apartment. And that became our home, because my father was a carpenter. And he fixed it up, and that's where we lived over in Utah. Now, see, the first week in Utah, I think we were greeted by, a dynamite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a dynamite. And so, our welcoming. Anyway, it was quite for a child, especially like myself, who was, 4 years old, it wasn't harsh, but I just can't believe how my parents and the other parents were able to live through all this, because we were pretty much I would assume we were pretty much in the poverty level. Take a look at our clothes. Don't they all look like more of a hand-me-down type? Yeah. So anyway, from what I understand, Mr. Wada would get people, the families together, the heads of families, and discuss who needed the money. I guess they would pool their money, or the money they earned from selling the vegetables and such, and he would dole them out, all right? But more the lighter side of Keetley is that Mr. Wada was an avid fisherman. I remember made a pond, and he stocked it with trout for the kids to fish in. I don't think did he allow any adults in there? I don't believe so.
Well, my grandfather used to take me when I was 5 or 6.
Yeah, that's right.
But just the families were there.
But anyway, he did that. The other thing was Mr. Wada would occasionally, I remember him holding bingo games and such, to give some of the recreational time for the workers. But for myself, I remember Tokyo, Fred Wada, Dennis Tsujimoto, and I. Right at the head of the Keetley was a convenience store. I don't know if it was a gas station either. It was a convenience store. We would go there every so often and just hang around, sit down, look forlorn, and the lady who owned the convenience store would come out and give each of us a little candy. And we take it back, hide somewhere, eat it. But we made a vow. We don't tell our parents that, because then we would never be able to go back again. So today's the first time we know that was a secret. But anyway, just to keep it short, anybody here related to a person by the name of Gene? Gene Kakigawa? Here's an incident that happened. I remember this when I was small. One morning, Gene, G-E, and he went skiing. I saw him go out from the apartment with skis on. Okay, skis. He went off into the mountains somewhere here. Later in the afternoon, he came back, all bloody, bleeding from the nose, cut on his face, and my mother and the ladies in the apartment, they were panicking. And what they had in their mind was Gene was mugged by anti-Japanese people, right? But later they were so relieved when they found out actually what happened. Gene ran into a tree. So he was so happy. How can you be so happy when someone runs away? But anyway, before I conclude, Mary told me this. Please don't talk too much about my father. Okay. I can't conclude this without saying something about Fred Wada. He was a guy extremely dynamic. He was a leader. He was harsh. He was harsh. He had an 8th grade education, somewhat unpolished. Am I allowed to say that?
Say whatever you want.
Okay. But anyway, I've never admired a man so much. You don't find people like that.
That's right.
You know. Also, he was a port commissioner in Los Angeles. He was instrumental in bringing the 1964 Olympics to Tokyo. All right, and also he was instrumental, I believe, in bringing the Olympics to Mexico. And I understand, just found out not too long ago that he actually escorted Peter Uberov. Remember him? He formed the Los Angeles Olympics, and he took him over. He took Uberov to Japan, I guess, to lay out plans for the Olympic. But anyway, I can't thank you all enough for coming here. Now, especially, I want to thank the descendants who brought your grandparents. I want to thank the descendants who brought your parents. And I want to thank the descendants who brought the memory of your family. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming, and I'm glad you were students.